What's going on, guys? YouTube, Dailymotion, Facebook, and Tumblr fans. This is Midnight Strike 3625 back again, and you are watching another classic review. So today we're going to talk about a band much like the last video with Def Leppard. We're going to talk about a band that I've rarely ever mentioned on this channel. I think I've only mentioned them in one video, but we're going to be talking about their masterpiece today, and that is, of course, the band Judas Priest. A band that I have a lot of respect for and a great deal of admiration, but until fairly recently I've never really been that much of a fan of them, per se, and today we're talking about their masterpiece, Painkiller, the 10-track masterpiece from 1990 and their breakthrough in the heavy metal scene. So, up until this point, Judas Priest has basically been playing mainly hard rock and more of the heavy side of rock, with the exception of their last album before Painkiller, which used a lot of synthesizers. So up until, 74 to Screaming for Vengeance, Rock-a-Roll, I should say, to Screaming for Vengeance, they have been playing mainly a traditional straight-up hard rock, heavy rock kind of formula. But this pretty much broke them into the heavy metal scene with Painkiller. Megadeth had already had Rust in Peace, and Judas Priest in the same year released this album, and it rivals Rust in Peace for being the best metal album of that year. In my opinion, Painkiller is just a titch better, but that's just me. So I'm comparing apples and oranges here, I know, different kind of genres for metal, but when it comes down to just metal at its bare roots, I definitely like this album, and it's awesome. So what makes this album so great? Well, let's get into it. The album kicks off with the familiar Painkiller, and it's got a really sick drum beat with some awesome distorted guitars in there. I really like the echoing effect used on this entire album. It sounds sleek, yet it sounds very well produced, and it's just the perfect amount of distortion with the perfect amount of echoing. Too many bands these days try to go for the echoing sound, but they place too much emphasis on the distortion, a la Trivium's In Waves, of course, and it just makes the production sound very flat. In this album, however, they completely master that, and by the sound of Redeemer of Souls, they're, returning to form, to this kind of form, that is. So, Painkiller is a definite awesome song. Really love it. It's the longest on the album, and it's got some really blaring vocals from Rob Halford. I absolutely love them. The next song is Hell Patrol. This one is a little bit more mid-tempo. It's not necessarily the fastest song on the album, but it's got some pretty awesome badass guitar riffs thrown in there as well. So that one is an awesome one as well. Guns Blazing, or All Guns Blazing, I should say, is another one where I particularly like the way that Rob Halford sings in the chorus, and I like the way that the guitars are just kind of surrounding the verses and everything, and just the general kind of structure of the song. It's a very well-crafted song. Leather Rebel is the fourth song on the album, and this is definitely another one of my favorites. I definitely really like the intro. It's just one of those thrashy guitar intros where they're just going crazy and shredding in that intro. Kind of the same thing with Metal Meltdown. They sound very similar. Metal Meltdown sounds like it's a little bit higher up on the scale versus Leather Rebel, where it sounds like it's a little bit lower where they're shredding. But then again, I digress. They're both very, very good songs, and you can definitely tell that this is a guitar-driven album with, centered around the vocals. So they're definitely not leaving anything out. They're pulling out all the stops. Same thing with Nightcrawler. However, in Nightcrawler, we get to a little bit more of an atmospheric touch as opposed to the just straight-up metal that we've been hearing on this album. So what I mean by that is when we get into Nightcrawler, it's just they go for a little bit more of an atmospheric touch with the echoing, the distortion, and everything, and then all of a sudden it gets into the rocking part, and the album, just completely kicks itself into second gear. So this song is not necessarily the weakest song on the album because there really is no weak link on this album, but this song definitely is one of the slower songs, but lyrically and just structurally, it's absolutely brilliant. Between the Hammer and the Anvil, this is another one where it's just kind of a straightforward, more rock-oriented song. It's still metal, much like everything else on this album, but it's definitely got more of a hard rock edge than anything else. So, A Touch of Evil, this is another slow song, but it's definitely got a lot going on with these synthesizers. One of the only songs on this album to have them, and it definitely creates another atmospheric effect. I really love the way Rob Halford sings in this song. Definitely one of the most prominent vocalists in metal today. The Battle Hymn, this is another one where it's just a minute-long instrumental intro into the closer, One Shot at Glory, which again picks itself back up into high gear again. And this is another one of my favorite songs on the album. So overall, this is the album that got me into Judas Priest. I absolutely love it. This is another 10 out of 10 for me. And I know I did two 10 out of 10 classic reviews in a row, back to back. Wasn't necessarily my intention, but this album really had to be talked about. I'm just discovering the rest of Judas Priest's discography after this, and this is the one that really drew me in. So this is Midnight Strike 3625. I hope you enjoyed watching this review. Keep calm and rock on.